Joining us now for a few moments to talk about baseball, but of course also talk about his thoughts on Hank Aaron is the great Joe Torre. Joe, Craig and Evan here in New York City. How are you, pal?
I'm good, guys.
Great. We appreciate you coming on. So, as a 19-year-old kid walking into that locker room for the first time and seeing Warren Spahn and Joe Adcock and Eddie Matthews and, of course, Hank Aaron, can you walk us through what it was like for you being a doe-eyed, bushy-tailed young guy walking into that locker room and seeing Hank Aaron for the first time?
Well, to be honest with you guys, I had a little head start on that. My brother Frank played for the Braves, and so when they were in the World Series in 57, 58, so as a 16-year-old, I got a chance to meet, the Aarons and the Eddie Matthews and Spahny and Burdette and Del Crandall and all those guys when I was a teenager. And so when I did wind up playing for the Braves, it was it's a lot more comfortable than it would have been if I had gone in cold turkey.
What kind of teammate was Hank Aaron?
It was great. I mean, he was a great player. He was a great player from early on. Never said, when I say he didn't say a whole lot, he used to kid around in the clubhouse. Eddie Matthews and him used to barb back and forth, everything good-natured. But, again, he kept pretty much to himself. You never realized what you had to go through. And I never realized what the black players had to put up with totally, until I was, a teammate of Hank's and then, of course, a teammate of Bob Gibson. In fact, one incident when I think it was 1962, was my second year, my first spring training with the Milwaukee Braves, and we were training in Bradenton, Florida, and we were moving into this new hotel, but they didn't take black players. So the Braves, and give them all the credit in the world, they moved out, and we moved to a nearby little community and went into a motel just so all the players could stay together and have their meals together and stuff like that. So, but that's what it was in Florida. Players had to stay out. They stayed in a lot of private homes, but didn't have all the all the things available to the white players.
Was there ever a moment that you can remember where Hank Aaron, or for that matter, the other African-American players that played alongside, ever talked about that openly with you guys or complained about it or, fretted about it?
They never did because, I guess those were the rules of the road. I got a little taste of it in the minor leagues, in 1960 when I was in the Northern League in the minor leagues, where when we stopped to get food, we were traveling in station wagons at the time. You stopped to get food, you had to, bring the food out to the Latin players and stuff. They wouldn't be allowed in these cafes or diners and stuff. So I had a little taste of it then.
What was the transition like to be a part of a franchise? You're in Milwaukee. I'm sure he's an icon there, and now you're going into the Deep South in Atlanta when the team moves to Atlanta. You're part of that transition. How was that transition, watching Hank go from icon in Milwaukee to now, okay, this is an Atlanta-based baseball team?
Yeah, but, Atlanta, and actually Atlanta, I got my first sort of eye-opener. My brother played in Atlanta when they were in the Southern League.
Right.
And I went to the ballpark there, and I looked over looking for a restroom, and it had colored restrooms. It had colored water fountain, and it just struck me. Because I had African American kids in my class. It never really struck me that they had to go in a separate restroom and stuff. And then of course you look out and all the African American fans are sitting in one section. It's mind-boggling, and unfortunately, I think we've seen what's happened even as recently as this year. How alive that feeling is amongst a lot of people, unfortunately.
Talking to Joe Torre here as we remember the great Hank Aaron. For guys that become iconic, like a Hank Aaron, some of those guys have a tough time being one of the guys in the locker room, and there's so much pressure on them outside of just what happens in between the white lines. Are there any stories you can share? Your memories of Hank Aaron, during a rain delay, during an off day, the type of guy he was amongst the other guys in the locker room?
It was very comfortable. Yeah, one thing about baseball locker rooms, there's no such thing as segregation of any kind. At least the ones I've been in. Everything was very comfortable. We were all baseball players, and really that's what was first and foremost. But Hank was quiet. Yeah, I mean, he made all the noise with his bat. That's for sure.
Right.
He was a great pure hitter. I put him, again in the same. They're almost the same age. They're 3 years apart. He and Willie Mays.
Right.
In fact, I texted Willie this morning when I learned of Hank's passing and let him know, because he's on the West Coast, so he didn't get it until I had texted him. So, I thought Hank probably was a better pure hitter, and Willie was probably more of a power hitter, even though Hank had more home runs.
Right. We're talking to the great Joe Torre. I say this today as a baseball fan. You don't really appreciate someone until you get to watch him every day. So for a lot of us, we see Hank Aaron's numbers, and they're incredible. I mean, to a lot of us, he's the real home run king. Getting to play with him, you mentioned him being a great pure hitter. What else about his game is something that maybe we can't appreciate by just going to Baseball Reference, but you got to appreciate by being his teammate for as long as you were?
Well, he was very unselfish to begin with. I mean, he would help any young kid or anybody who asked him a question about hitting, because, he was such a natural. But he was an excellent defensive player, right fielder, not the center fielder like Willie.
Right.
He was uncomfortable playing center field, because he did have to do that on occasion when players were hurt. But he was a team player. Had a great arm, steal bases, even though he didn't do it with flair. He just stole bases to try to help you win a ball game, as opposed to try and build numbers up. One thing, I hit behind him for 8 years, and when he was at first base and I was hitting, and I had maybe a 1-2 count or an 0-2 count, especially with 2 out, Hank would try to steal. For the most part, he was safe, but if he was out, this way I got to start next inning with a fresh count. So if I could go to sleep on that one. He was always going to do that, but he was a great teammate, knew how to play the game, and he showed up for work every day. He was just that type of player. He didn't care what it looked like. He just knew what he had to do.
Is there a guy today that reminds you of anything like him that's currently playing?
Well, I mean, I had a special player with me for 12 years, Derek Jeter, who, because he wasn't the pure hitter, not too many people I can see are pure hitters like Henry was. But just actually the one guy, and of course they're more showy now, the players, but the one guy I've seen in recent years that, shows me a lot of the attributes of a Hank Aaron is Mookie Betts. Again, he's not a pure hitter like Hank, but he does all the things to help you try to win ball games.
That's amazing. If I know we don't like to talk about money a lot, but when you talk about money and you see the kind of money that's being thrown around, like George Springer, not to knock George Springer, was he a 270 lifetime hitter, whatever it is, getting $150 million. What would Hank Aaron have gotten? $1 billion? To play baseball?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But of course, Hank came up during the time there was no free agency. That didn't come around till like 1976.
Yeah.
And that made a huge difference. And then he got to Atlanta and he finally made $100,000, and it was like that. That was really the mark. You get to $100,000, that means you were a superstar. Now if you have a good year, and I don't resent this, trust me, because I was a union guy for a long time as a player. That I think we try to hang that great superstar on players really before they've really earned that.
Right.
We talk a lot about, and we're talking to Joe Torre, and we've had this conversation with Rob Manfred and a lot of other baseball people, that baseball does a great job, maybe better than any other sport, of honoring its past players, its iconic players. It's Mickey Mantles, DiMaggio's, Cobb, obviously Henry Aaron, but doesn't do the greatest job in promoting its current stars. And I'm trying to figure out, is that, do you think, Joe, because we've all changed, meaning the American public, or do you think something has changed about the sport itself?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I know, the other sports, they give you the close-up, even, football, which is not easy to get close-ups. You got all the equipment on and the helmet and stuff, but I know baseball has been trying to go in that direction, to get the players to be, go out there and really spotlight these guys. And I think it will happen. I don't think we're in baseball against that. I think it's been more, the team sport. I know, that.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the players have changed? And that's part of it?
No, I think definitely players have changed. And you started this conversation by talking about the history of our game. And I think it would serve all the players very well if, if they were they were aware of the history of our game and can understand and appreciate why they're getting paid a lot of money and all the people that really put in the time to make that happen.
Sure. I'll tell you, well, one thing that would change the game is striking out the amount of times a guy like Hank Aaron struck out, which is under 100. I marvel at that sometimes, Joe. When you look back at some of the great players of the 50s, 60s, 70s, they weren't striking out 180 times a year. Now it's everybody strikes out over 100 times a year,
Yeah, that's a concern. I mean, you walk back with your head held high, and it was always something that you sort of let people down when you struck out, but that's different, and it's not something I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more activity on the field instead of just the home runs, the walks, and the strikeouts.
How do you change that? Because you bring up a good point that I guess in your era, if you struck out, you were almost embarrassed. Like you went back to the dugout, oh, God, I can't believe I struck out. Now, nobody seems to care. I struck out. It's the same thing as a pop-up or the same thing as a ground out, even though we know that's not the case. So other than a change in attitude, how do you change that?
Well, I think it's a change in, attitude. I think it's more approach because I think it has to come from the team on the type of what's important. We glorify individual achievement, and when you think about these young players and youngsters, actually before they play professionally, they're doing these travel teams. They're going from town to town, and when you realize that they're going to and play with a bunch of strangers where they're auditioning, it's a little bit different, as opposed to playing with a group of guys that you work together to try to win games instead of winning praise. And I think that's a contributor.
Talking to Joe Torre, a little bit about baseball, of course, about Hank Aaron. I was just reading online, there's this crazy story that Hank Aaron shared where he'd been signed back in 1951 by the Indianapolis Clowns of the Negro American League, okay? And he was there for a couple of months, and then apparently he had two offers. There was one offer from the New York Giants and the other offer from the Boston Braves.
Right.
And the Braves offered him $50 per month more than the offer he got from the Giants. And had they not done that, he would have been on the same team as Willie Mays.
Well, they would have worked well together.
$50.
A right fielder and a center fielder, pretty good. But yeah, the money wasn't there. My first year in the big leagues, which was 1961, I think my salary was like either $7,000 or $6,500. So we've come a long way, as we say.
Hank Aaron, Willie Mays in the same outfield, and maybe the Giants don't move to San Francisco. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen with that, Joe, right? It's crazy to think about.
That was all about the Dodgers.
Yeah,
they built a ballpark, so they took the Giants with them, though.
Hey, Joe, you think there's going to be a decision soon on this DH in the National League, or no?
I don't know. To me, again, it's just an opinion. That takes a lot of, talking to the Players Association and everything. You just can't dictate that this is what's going to happen. But, it sounds like it's eventually going to happen. Again, I don't know any more than you do as far as where they are in that conversation, but I think a lot of it's going to take, talking to the union and talking among the ownership.
I know that the virus is unpredictable, but do you think in this moment the season's going to start on time, or do you think there's a chance it doesn't start on time right now?
To me personally, and again, we're still, I'm no longer, I'm not with Major League Baseball. I'm just an observer, and I do some consulting for them. But I think they still right now have a plan to start on time. I think it's doubtful personally because when you realize that spring training starts the middle of February and where we are with the pandemic, I think it'd be doubtful to think that we're going to start on time. Although I think we're going to have a whole lot more games that are going to be played in the season this year than we did last. Yeah.
Joe, I always wonder this. Is it harder to manage all-stars or lesser skilled players?
Well, I had a little of each.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. I'm trying to figure out, was it more work for you trying to control and figure out how to keep superstars happy and motivated and content and focused, where you couldn't talk to them necessarily in the manner you would talk to a lesser experienced player or a young guy coming up who didn't have maybe the same skill set or back of the baseball card? Which is easier in your experience?
Well, I had the most success with the Yankees. We had a lot of superstars. I think when you try to make sense, and I really was addicted to team play. I mean, I learned it early on. I saw all the rewards of team play, and I had a group that really bought into that concept and never got tired of winning. So I don't really. I think players have to be made accountable to each other, and that's what I did. But I didn't really have any problem with players, no matter how much money they made, as far as getting a point across. And as far as baseball, I think we have to be self-motivated in baseball. You play 162 games. You play every single day, and you got to eliminate the highs and the lows and go out there and find the level you can compete at on a regular basis.
I think, tell me if I'm wrong, when you became the Yankee manager, based on the age difference between you and the young stars of the team, I would think probably made that maybe a little bit easier, as opposed to you become the manager of a team that has veteran stars who maybe hadn't won yet. Getting a team of younger guys, I would think, probably made that a little bit easier from a standpoint of them respecting your experience, your age, and that type of thing.
No, I don't necessarily think that. I think the older guys, having been around long enough, will understand, what the pluses and minuses and the grunting you have to do, and for the unselfishness, they learn all that. And we had the same rules for players. I didn't care how much money they made. Everybody had to be there a certain time, and everybody was going to be in a position to help us win a game from time to time. So we really emphasized the team concept, and and it helped us in a lot of ways. I mean, you think about 1996, we lose David Cohn. Normally, you lose a starter, really your number one starter, and all of a sudden you're gone. But we had people that stepped up, and that's what to me is important.
even if it was only for 30 seconds, maybe 10 seconds, when Tony La Russa took the White Sox job, did you think to yourself, you know what? I want to do this too. I'm only a few years older than Tony. Let me come back and manage, even if it was for only 10 seconds, Joe. Just a little bit of time.
Well, once I tried to talk Tony out of it, after I had a conversation with him, he convinced me he was doing the right thing.
That's funny.
I wish him well. The game is a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
But no, I never had. I had a few opportunities when I did retire in 2010. I had a couple of operations that were very tempting, but did
the Mets ever try to get you to come back?
No, just to go to opening day a couple of times.
No, because that came up a lot on this radio station. You know who'd be perfect to put Joe Torre, bring him back?
Hey, Aaron Boone won over 100 games in his first 2 seasons managing. When you had him as a player, did you ever think he'd be a manager-type material?
You know what? It didn't surprise me when you think, he's got a pretty good, bloodline. His grandfather played, his father played. So, they know the ins and outs of the game. And Booney, unfortunately, we didn't have him long enough. Actually, Booney was the reason we got Alex Rodriguez.
Oh, yeah.
When he got hurt playing basketball and we didn't have a third baseman, so there it was.
Hey, when your phone rings with something like, do you remember that moment when the phone rang and they said, look, we got a problem, Aaron Boone was playing basketball, he got hurt, we're in trouble? Like, do you remember getting that phone call?
Oh, yeah. Yep, and I got a phone call. What do you think about getting Alex Rodriguez? We jumped on that.
How soon after the Boone phone call was the A-Rod phone call? Was it right after?
I don't remember that,
okay.
But it wasn't too far after that.
Right.
Yeah.
And who makes that call? Is that Cashman who calls you on that?
Cash. Yeah, I heard from Cash, yeah.
That's crazy, right? Can you imagine that? First you get a call, Booney's out.
Yeah.
Then you get a call, you want the best player in the game?
The history of baseball altered by that moment when you think about it.
By any chance, did you read the book on Steinbrenner that Bill Madden wrote, or no?
I read, I think I did. It was a good book. None of it's 100% true, probably, but it was a good book, yeah. I know Bill had access to a lot of people over there.
What seems so crazy to me of how George Steinbrenner, ruled over the New York Yankees, and I recognize that he was in declining health, of course, towards the end of your run as the Yankee manager, is that every guy that ever sat in the seat that you sat in at some point had to look over their shoulder after like a random game in early June that you might have lost, wondering, is this the day that I'm getting called to his office,
Yeah, you know what? I called George more than he called me, trust me. And I think maybe because, I did get George on the back nine. So, I had a good relationship with him. He wasn't easy. He was hard to satisfy. If you win, you had to win more. And it just, that's the way he was wired. But I knew that going in. Yep. So that's about it, guys.
Thinking about that phone call you got about A-Rod, I'm thinking about the phone call or the conversation you had when they told you they were trading Tom Seaver. I mean, think about it. You were part of the 2 of the most iconic trades in the history of New York baseball when you really think about it. Managing when the Seaver trade was made and managing when they traded for A-Rod. Worlds apart, worlds different, but experiencing both, Joe.
That's for sure. I remember that. I knew that going in.
Well, we appreciate your time today, really in memory of the great Hank Aaron. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you're well and your family's well, and we look forward to talking to you again around opening day. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right. The great Joe Torre.